Welcome to today's presentation, Speed Matters, Secure Your Infrastructure with Chef. Let's go ahead and get started. Jody, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. So today we are going to be giving a webinar, Speed Matters, as Erin said. And in September and October of this year, the Learn Chef Rally team, which is Robin, myself, and a couple of other people, took to the streets in the US and the UK to deliver a workshop that was designed to help engineers drive compliance automation in their organizations using Chef Effortless Infrastructure Suite. This webinar today is going to be a distilled version of that driving compliance workshop, and our goal is to help anyone who couldn't attend the road trip understand the importance of security and compliance in your infrastructure, and also to demonstrate how Chef Effortless Infrastructure Suite can help you automate your security and compliance goals. So before we get started, I want to start with a poll just to get an idea for what area of expertise each of you on this webinar has. So if you could go ahead and submit your answer. We're wondering if you're from the infrastructure or operations side of things, a security team, the testing and QA team, or software development. So go ahead and fill in your answer on the slide there, and we'll look at the results in just a minute. All right. Ooh, okay, so we got a few people from security on the call. That's awesome. Some people from software development, and then it looks like the majority of our attendees on the webinar today are from infrastructure and operations. So if you are from that infra ops world, you're probably familiar with the Chef Infra product that allows you to automate your configuration management. We also have a couple of other tools that are going to help you integrate that Chef Infra configuration management with your compliance and security management. So for the security and software development people on the call, this is going to be some awesome new information showing you some tools that will help you work with your applications or create those security packages. So without any further ado, let's actually get into the meat of this webinar. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start by talking a little bit about what the compliance challenge is these days, what we mean when we say compliance, and how security and compliance play into the software development lifecycle. Then we'll talk about different security strategies, some historical strategies that are not necessarily scalable, some newer strategies, and then what we feel at Chef is a very strong security strategy. Then Robin will actually demonstrate live our security strategy. He'll show us how we drive compliance with Chef Effortless Infrastructure Suite. And then the last thing we'll do is wrap up with some real world results. So a real life example of someone using the practices and the tool sets that we're going to demonstrate today and talk about today. We'll talk about how that's benefited their organization as well. My name is Jody Wolfborn, as Erin said. My co-presenter is Robin Beck, and we are both developer advocates on the developer relations team here at Chef. So our goal is really to help be that liaison between the development community, people who are using Chef, and the internal Chef company to really advocate for what you all want to see in our products, in our website, in our learning documentation, and all that kind of stuff. So we included our Twitter information on there so that you can follow us. We're going to be awesome resources for you to reach out to moving forward in order to understand what Chef is as a company, as a solution, as a product, and all that good stuff. So feel free to connect with us. We look forward to it. And without further ado, we'll actually get into the compliance challenges that we're facing today. So Historically, compliance and security have been a fairly large challenge for a couple of reasons. And one of those reasons is the perception that we as an information technology group have about compliance and security. Gartner did a survey and found that a large majority of IT professionals believe that security actually slows things down as they're trying to get things to production. And even 77% of surveyed information security professionals believed that their own policies, the policies that they themselves enforce, prevent the rest of their companies from delivering value with speed or flexibility. But the reality is that all of our favorite operating systems, all of our favorite applications, everything that we use in this sort of technology world ships with much more than a handful of vulnerabilities to begin with. So that makes it impossible to deliver safe, reliable systems and applications without having a really strong security strategy in place. On this slide, on the right-hand side, you'll see a list, the top 10 operating systems listed by the number of distinct vulnerabilities that ship with those systems. I could only show 10 on this slide, but you'll, if you check the sources in the slides after this, you'll notice that the 11th operating system is actually Red Hat Linux, as Enterprise Linux as well. So literally all of the most popular operating systems are in the top 10 list of having a huge number of vulnerabilities. So compliance and being able to verify that you are safe against those vulnerabilities becomes imperative for your organization. And just when you think you've managed to identify all those 3,000 vulnerabilities that ship with your operating system, and maybe you've even gone through and patched those vulnerabilities, it seems like another one always pops up. Think about like WannaCry or Heartbleed or those zero-day vulnerabilities that come up, and it puts your team into a perpetual state of trying to catch up with your compliance goals. And that time spent reacting to vulnerability announcements or even participating in normally scheduled audits detracts from the valuable time your team has to work on new or improved features, systems, or processes that actually provide value back to your business via customers or internal customers. And on top of all of that, the struggle to remain compliant is very interesting as well. Generally, the assumed level of compliance matches the left graph you see on the screen. We assume that our level of compliance is linear. And so we're okay with just doing periodic checks through time. Maybe we do a quarterly audit, or if we're really good, maybe we do a monthly compliance audit. We assume that in between each of those audit periods, we're still at the same level of compliance as we are during the actual audit. But what happens in reality is that between those audits and assessments, we don't have a good idea for what our actual level of compliance is. You can only know your level of compliance as often as you're checking. And so, if you do start to check a little bit more often, we start to see this this graph on the right side where during an actual audit, we are super compliant because we're proving that we have to prove during that time that we're compliant. But as we add more systems and more applications into our infrastructure, we start to move away from that state of compliance. And so as you start to do more continuous compliance checks in your systems, you'll start to notice that you actually see these dips and valleys just before your audit period where you're not in a very good compliance posture. And so we want to fix that. All of those problems are, of course, exacerbated by the fact that every team within your organization has different goals and different opinions. And since we're in the technology industry, we probably have a lot of different opinions, and they're probably very strong opinions about which tools and which languages we should use to accomplish the goals that we're trying to accomplish. The compliance officer maybe has a giant binder full of regulations that need to be followed. They can then hand that giant binder, which they probably got from their either an auditing agent or maybe straight from the Center for Internet Security itself. They take that big binder and they hand it to your security team. Well, the security team has totally different tools that they're using in order to scan and verify the state of compliance and security in their systems. And so they have to translate those Center for Internet Security or auditing controls into PowerShell or Bash scripts or into a scanning language that's going to reach out to their infrastructure and validate those things. Once they've validated the state of compliance, they then hand those reports off to the development and operations teams. And those reports don't always tell you how to bring the systems or applications into compliance again. Sometimes it's just a report, hey, this is out of compliance, go and figure it out yourself. And so ultimately, that's a lot of manual hands off and a lot of time wasted just doing rudimentary discovery of your compliance and security status. So it's really, really important for everyone in your organization to have the ability to understand your security compliance posture so that we can sort of have that single source of truth for all of these teams and make sure that we're actually all working toward the same goal. And that goal is getting a safe, reliable product out to our customers, whoever they may be. So the beauty of all of this, though, is that once you do identify that common language and a common set of tools for everyone, then security and compliance become things that we can codify. We can turn it into repeatable, verifiable code, and then automate our security and compliance strategies. So that's going to solve the peaks and valleys issue that we saw on the previous slide. And it's ultimately going to mean that you're constantly evaluating your infrastructure. So I want to take another quick poll here and see who knows what the phrase ATO stands for in the context of security and compliance. I'll give you a minute to answer. If you've never heard it before, that's totally fine. We'll talk a little bit about what it is after this. But I just want to get a level of understanding for where we're at. Okay, I want to take one quick second also while people are putting in their poll results. I saw a question in the chat indicating that the slides aren't progressing. That looks like it came from Michelle Stewart. Can someone else verify? On our side, we're able to see the slides just fine, but I want to make sure everybody else is as well. Okay, I don't see any feedback, so I'm going to assume everybody else can, and we'll go on to the results for this poll. Ooh, awesome. So we have a lot of people, or a few people, who actually know what ATO stands for with regards to compliance. That's awesome. We have majority of us are not sure or never heard that phrase before, though. So I'll talk a little bit about what ATO is. The acronym ATO actually stands for Authority to Operate. And in this case, it's a term used by government and compliance agencies to indicate whether a team or project actually has permission to ship the changes they've worked so hard on. So it's of extreme importance that everyone in the organization has the ability to understand your security and compliance posture so that they can easily identify whether they have the authority to operate. Giving everyone a single source of truth allows all of your teams to work toward that common goal and to know at a glance whether they do have ATO or the authority to operate. So now that we have addressed what some of the common compliance challenges out there are and why security and compliance are so important to software organizations today, let's talk a little bit about the security strategies we've seen. When we talk to customers about their current security practices, we see a lot of strategies similar to this, where compliance and security reviews are saved until the very last step of a sometimes very long development process. The compliance officer, like I said previously, probably has a giant binder full of regulations that need to be followed. They take that binder and they hand it to your security team. The security team makes one of these crazy PowerShell scripts like this that goes through, iterates over every instance you have in your infrastructure, verifies the compliance of whatever configurations they need to. And then, depending on how many tools your security team is using, they might hand off like 5 different reports to different teams within your organization to help bring those systems into compliance. The frustrating part about this, especially for the application developers and the operations engineers, is that you get through the first 3 steps in your development process before you ever think about reviewing your code for security purposes. And so once you get to that security review, if you do not pass it, you then have to go all the way back to square one and start over with your application changes. This is not scalable at all. It does not allow you to be flexible with those changes and to pivot if you need to take care of a vulnerability or remediate a vulnerability. And so just like the development and operations teams historically have been in conflict, before the advent of DevOps practices, in today's world, security is having to fight similar battles of moving away from being the impediment to innovation and moving toward becoming the enabler or expediter of innovation instead. So any new update or innovation into your systems shouldn't cause impact just to maintain your security equilibrium. Today's reality is that security should be the responsibility of everyone in the organization. The older way we handled security in mainframe or monolithic technologies caused these truly air-gapped systems and you might have to physically actually access the mainframe and plug things in to make the necessary modifications. So in that reality, Chef Infra came into being to help operations administrators and engineers be able to make changes to their systems without physically accessing them. So automating the configuration of your systems. It allowed you to automate it in such a way that you got better consistency across your teams and across your infrastructure. So essentially, that's exactly the same approach we're taking now to solving security in a new way. The problem of having so many disparate security and compliance systems and tools becomes a lot easier when you use a shared tool like Chef InSpec. Chef InSpec is the language that lets organizations codify their concerns in a discrete and actionable way so that all of your stakeholders have the same source of truth, whether or not things are in compliance. A strong security strategy should include a common language shared among your teams. I said that a few times before, and it is really important. All of the teams that are responsible for security in your organization should be able to understand at a glance what your security and compliance posture is. That language, the common shared language, is really going to be the codification of security and compliance. And stakeholders are going to be the folks who care directly about security and compliance in your systems, or anyone who needs to understand what's being codified in order to certify that compliance. Managing security and compliance as code is going to be the only way you'll enable your organization to have continuous compliance. And the benefits of that code, or managing compliance and security as code, you get the ability to collaborate in a common language that's human readable and machine readable. You get the ability to scale beyond just one system in a consistent, simplified, repeatable, and reliable way. You get the ability to shift your security testing all the way to the left of your development process so that security and compliance are being checked for at every stage of your development process instead of just the one right before production. And then the last thing, which is really important, especially as we start to move into a much more future thinking security realm, is you get the ability to continuously monitor the status of your security and compliance. So instead of just getting a compliance status report at the quarter or every month or what have you, you actually get continuous compliance scanning in your systems, which ultimately allows you to drive security and compliance and remove security as a barrier and make it actually an enabler of speed. And so on the right-hand side in this slide, you see an example of some InSpec code, some Chef InSpec code that goes through and verifies that the SSH protocol is set correctly on the system. It's a codified regulation that the auditors can understand, that your development team can see exactly where they need to fix things if it is out of compliance, and your security team gets an immediate view into what the actual state of compliance is based on this control. In just a minute, Robin is going to demonstrate exactly how easy it is to develop a baseline understanding of the security of your running infrastructure from the Chef Automate dashboard. Chef Effortless Infrastructure Suite allows you to not only detect security and compliance vulnerabilities in your estate using Chef InSpec, like I just said, but it also allows you to remediate those issues using Chef Infra, which I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. And on top of all of that, you get that single pane of glass for all members of your organization, regardless of their area of expertise, to immediately understand your state of compliance. And like I said, Robin is going to demo that in just a second. But what this whole package also allows is an incredibly easy integration with whatever provisioning or third-party cloud utilities you use. So it integrates with Google Cloud Platform, it integrates with Azure, it integrates with Amazon Web Services, all of the different platforms that you might be working with. Chef Effortless Infrastructure Suite allows you to maintain that connection and integration with each of those systems. So, Robin, I will hand it over to you to walk us through scanning a node and developing a baseline of security for compliance.
Thanks, Jody, and thanks for the great introduction. Really great to know the context in which this demo stands. Can you hear me all right, too?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Thanks so much. All right, well, welcome, everyone. Glad to have you with us here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and you should be seeing momentarily here my Chef Automate dashboard. All right, looking good on my end. Please
awesome.
Let me know if you can't see it.
On my end as well.
Great, thanks, Jody. So we're going to start off first by trying to get some insight into the current state of compliance that I have set up in this little demo environment. Right now I have a Chef Automate dashboard loaded in here. And if I scroll down through the dashboard sections, you'll see the event feed, which kind of shows what's going on right now. You'll see that yesterday we created a scan job on this Automate cluster, and the scan job is running a baseline scan. We're going to be taking a look at the compliance tab within the Automate dashboard here, which will give us insight into the current state of our fleet. And clicking on compliance and scrolling down, you'll see a nice little summary of the current state of compliance for all nodes that are set up. I only have one node running right now. And if I were to click on scan jobs, I would see that a baseline scan has been set up. And opening it up, it's a scheduled scan that runs about every 5 minutes and presents the results back in the reports tab here. So taking a look at this, we get a nice big warning that our system is not compliant. And I guess I should mention here that we're loading a particular compliance profile to scan against this node. If I were to open up the profiles section, I would see a list of the profiles I have currently available on this Automate server, the DevSec Linux Security Baseline profile, which I obtained from the profile store that comes with Chef Automate. You'll see a ton of different profiles that our team has put together here, and this essentially takes common standards like the CIS, Center for Internet Security Standards, and translates them into InSpec code that we can run as a part of our scans. So I've loaded that profile from the profile store. It's available for me to execute against any nodes. And back in the reports section, let's check out the results of that scan that's running every 5 minutes or so. Clicking on one node and scrolling down, I'll see the name of the scan job I initiated. I have a CentOS 7 box that I'm running this profile against. And you'll see here that I can take a look at the scan results by clicking off to the right here on the scan results button. And it pops out a little window that shows me which scan was run, which profile, Linux-baseline. And uncollapsing it, you'll see all of the failed controls or tests that were run against this node. You'll see the failures are listed first, and if we scroll down further, the controls that passed show up as well. So what's nice about this is we're getting some insight into the current state of compliance for this node. Now, of course, ideally, I've gone through and loaded up a profile and even modified it such that it only runs controls or tests that I want to see the results of. So for example, login.defs is a very common thing that we want to make sure is in order. And if I were to uncollapse that control, I would see that it's a critical or severe issue. And it would show me all the individual tests in this nice readable language that shows me, okay, what passed? First, login.defs, the file exists, right? It should be a file as opposed to a directory, etc. A lot of common tests, and that file does pass in most cases, but we do have a failing control down here, or a failing expectation. such that within that path, we should have a line called env_supath that is set to a particular value. So we see this nice human readable report that says what of this control passed and what failed. And what I really love is clicking the source button, you'll see the real InSpec code that was used to create this control. We'll see the control is titled OS, operating system number 5. It's a high impact, and then we see the tests grouped into these describe blocks. And the one that we're failing here is this particular line for what the env_supath should be set to. So we get this nice little summary of all the different pieces that we'd like to have compliant. And there are other ways to view this information as well. Clicking on the node itself, you'll see a nice little collated list of the controls here, and we can scroll through them as they're grouped according to OS 1 through, etc. And then down here into other types of concerns, like package 02, do not install telnet server. This is, again, a very important control we want to make sure that we pass to make sure none of our information is handled in plain text. So the package telnet should not even be installed. So we have a nice little list here of the controls that we're failing, the controls that we've passed, and what we'd like to do is then begin looking at, well, which of these controls do I really care about? And so it's time to begin thinking about how we can filter this information. And it's great because we can just go ahead and run a scan, get this constant feedback about the current state of our compliance. But what we'd really like to do is begin thinking about what controls I care about. So to start off here, you should see a slide that's been pushed to your screen that shows 3 particular controls we're going to focus on as a part of this kind of demo environment we've set up. The first one that we're going to look at is that package 02. So that same exact one we looked at before, do not install telnet server. And we're also going to check OS 1 and OS 5. First, the trusted hosts login, and then again, that login.defs. So for the sake of this demo, what we're going to say is that we're really concerned with those particular violations. What we would like to do is build the ability for us to go through and make sure that anywhere that an application is deployed, that we're able to prioritize those particular tests. So what are our goals here? With this next section, what we're going to do is we've created a list of our security concerns now, and there are 3 particular controls that I'm concerned with. Well, now I am getting a list of all these failures back, but what I would like to do is be able to package up those controls and run them anywhere where an application that I would like to ship is currently loaded. What I mean to say is that it'd be nice if we can get our application servers to scan themselves for these particular controls that I'm interested in. So to assist us with this, we're going to begin talking about how we can package up a compliance application that can be run anywhere where your app server is loaded. And to do this, I'm going to step into the node that I've been scanning here within our demo. And I'm going to use this node as a workstation to build some of these packages. So what I mean to say is that I'm on a CentOS 7 box here that I've been scanning. And here I'm just seeing a nice VS Studio code integration that I can speak to the CentOS 7 box with. And here I've gone ahead and put together a little package called report that is a simple InSpec executable that we can use to scan our node. I want to walk you through this little package that I've built. Firstly, starting with the inspec.yaml file. This report package is going to go ahead and speak to our automate server. And this little tiny kind of metadata file, inspec.yaml, essentially states that I'm going to make this compliance package depend on a profile on my automate server called Linux-baseline. And we'll also see that I'm going to load it from a particular user. To get some insight into where those values come from, you could pop back into the Chef Automate dashboard. You could look under Profiles, and you will see that DevSec Linux Security Baseline and the identifier admin/Linux-baseline. That's the profile I would like to pull from my Chef Automate server, and I'd like to run it against any node that is going to be running my new application that I would like to audit. So in addition to this inspec.yaml file, I can do a couple other things inside of this report package. In particular, I can set up a list of controls that I would like to run from that profile. So within the directory called controls here, I have linux.rb. And what's nice about this is I can state exactly what controls I would like to run from the Linux-baseline profile. So here I'm requiring that profile, and I'm stating that I only want to run those 3 controls we looked at earlier, package 2, OS5, and OS1. We could also go the opposite direction. I could run the entire profile, and I could exclude underscore controls as well. So that's it. That is a pretty simple little application that I would like to put together and run anywhere where I'd like to audit an application server. Essentially, I can have this application server audit itself and report the information back to the Chef Automate server. So to do this, we could package up this application in a number of ways, but we're going to use Chef Habitat to help us with this. Chef Habitat is a great way to package up your applications in kind of a platform agnostic manner. And it hooks in really nicely with other products like InSpec, Chef Infra, and the Chef Automate dashboard we've been looking at. So essentially, I'm going to package this application and run it with Chef Habitat. To do that, I have created a directory inside this report package called Habitat, and every Habitat package has a plan file. Opening up the plan.sh, inside of it, you'll see some information related to the metadata for this plan. In particular, the package name, version, and origin, where the package will be loaded from, maintainer, licensing information, etc. And if you're building Chef Habitat packages for other Chef products, one nice thing about Habitat is the ability to use what's called scaffolding. Inside our plan, we can essentially define all the dependencies for our applications. And if we use scaffolding, that prevents us from having to go through and define all of our build and runtime dependencies separately if we're just scaffolding out a simple Chef Infra package. In addition to providing the scaffolding, I've also put some directives here that point to my Chef Automate server, the user that I would like to log in as, and a token I can obtain from the Automate dashboard. Pretty simple stuff here inside of a plan file. But moving through it, what we'd like to do is display how this application should be run. And to do this, we're essentially going to set up a reporting feature within Habitat that allows us to say, I don't only want to run this package, I'd like to report the results back to my Chef Automate server so that I can see in real time what the state of my application server is. To do this, I should mention that it's this inspec exec config.json file. This file is going to go through and define where the reporter should grab information from, in this case, the standard out after the package has been loaded, and where it should report the information back to, which is our Chef Automate server. So this is a pretty standard little inspec config that I can put together, where I can state where I should obtain profiles to and where I should report the information back to. You're noticing probably a lot of variables inside this file, such as cfg.automate.url, cfg.automate.token, and I can pass those in from this default.toml file within the Habitat package. This is an easy place for us to define variables for our package. In this case, if I'm going to go ahead and change information like the URL of my Automate server, the user I should be grabbing the profile as, or the token that I need, I can adjust it in an easy location that will be propagated through to the rest of the InSpec config. So it's probably a lot of information, but the pieces that I want to make clear to you is that we have an InSpec application here. It is comprised of the inspec.yaml and then a controls directory that specifies what controls should be included from that profile. And then I have a habitat directory that states how to contact the Automate server and where to report the information to and from. So I'm going to get ready to build this package with Habitat unless I see any questions popping through. All right. I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal session here. And what I have done is I've installed Habitat on this machine. You can see I'm using 0.90.6 release. And from here now, I'm ready to go ahead and build my package. To do so, I'm going to change into that package called report, and I'm going to enter what's called the Habitat Studio with Hab Studio Enter. This is a clean room environment that I can use to build my package, and it ensures that only the build and runtime dependencies that are needed are loaded by the package when it runs later on. I'll have to accept the product license to enter the studio for Habitat. And if it needs to, it's going to go ahead and grab any core packages needed to run the studio. It's a very isolated environment. This is the part where I tell a joke, but fresh out. And at this point, I'm entering the studio, and I'm ready to go ahead and build my package. So next time I enter the studio, that'll happen a lot quicker. This is the first time the studio has been launched on this machine. And at this point, I'm ready to build and see if I was able to plug those values into my plan file correctly. So if anyone's lost or just joining us, essentially I have built a small little InSpec application, and now I'm going through and building that package with Habitat. This will allow me to load that package with the Habitat supervisor anywhere where my application should be running. And to be clear, I could also run my other applications with Habitat as well. So now I've gone through and built the package. If I were to look inside of the results directory, I would see that I have a new Habitat artifact file called a heart file. This is my Habitat artifact that I can go ahead and run inside of my supervisor. The supervisor is what's responsible for loading our packages and any services on our application servers here. And what I can say is I can run as root the hab sup run command to go ahead and load that heart file from before. Of course, I'm in the studio environment, so notice this is pretty neat, right? The studio is a clean room environment. It's very contained, and notice that sudo is not installed inside this environment. So saved myself a little bit of pain there. I exit out of the studio, and now I'll rerun that command.
One thing I want to point out about that little blip there is now no one can ever say, well, it ran on my system, because the Habitat package has everything it needs. It doesn't matter what system it's running on. So Robin could never come back to me and say, well, I don't know why it didn't work on your system. It didn't work on mine, or it worked on mine.
That's right, because Habitat is running the package, not really the underlying OS, right?
Exactly. The Habitat
Beautiful.
supervisor.
Yes. And this is great. You can see that I've loaded the package with the supervisor. It's currently going to sleep until it runs that control again. And notice here, we were successfully able to load our 3 controls. So we have 2 successful controls, 1 control failure, and these are all the individual tests within those controls. And so what do we see, right? If I were to scroll through this, I would see the output from the DevSec Linux security baseline. I would see OS 1 passes, OS 5 fails. And that's exactly what we expect from the things that we wanted to test before, which I'll throw back up on the screen for you. Package 02, OS 05, and OS 01, those 3 controls that I limited from my controls linux.rb file. Excellent. So we now have a nice little compliance package that I can load on any of these application servers that are required to be audited. And we can get back the state of that compliance by heading back into the Chef Automate server. If I now go ahead and switch back into the reports view of my compliance dashboard, if I click on nodes, I will see that 2 nodes, or 2 different scans of the same node, are present. This CentOS 7 one is the one that we initiated manually through the scan jobs section of the Automate dashboard. However, right here, I will see the internal IP address being reported back from that CentOS 7 node when the scan was last ran, and you'll notice that instead of running all the controls included in the DevSec Linux security baseline, I have 1 control failure, and clicking on scan results and opening it up, I can see the 3 controls that were listed inside my compliance package, ensuring that we're only testing the things that need to be tested on those app servers. Woohoo!
Woohoo indeed. That's awesome.
Great. So now we have the ability to automate the process of scanning our app servers for compliance vulnerabilities. We know exactly what should be tested, and we can be sure that the node is going to continue reporting back its state into Chef Automate into the future. Great. Jody, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
No, I don't think so. Not a ton, but I do want to maybe do our last poll before we get into remediating this issue.
Excellent. I will stop sharing and feel free to throw your poll.
Awesome. Okay, so you all should be seeing a poll now. What I would like to know is, well, actually, I'll go back 1 slide first. So these are the goals that we have. We want to create a list of our security concerns, scan our running server, remediate the application, and sort of automate that process of detecting and correcting compliance concerns. Currently in your organization today, I would love to get a feel for how long it would take you currently, take you and your team to create a list of those current regulations, scan your running infrastructure, remediate any violations, and report back to your stakeholders on the remediations and the compliance status. I don't super expect a ton of people to pick a year, but I will say in my own experience, before I came to Chef, I was a systems administrator, and I worked for a company that had acquired about 50 other smaller companies, and it actually did take us about a year to complete an entire audit cycle with remediation and reporting in the end. So I will click a year and submit that, and then let's check out what the results are for the rest of you. So it looks like maybe I'm not the only one who it takes a year for. It looks like about half of you are at a quarter and about half of you are at a month. So I just want to point out, I talked for like 30 minutes because I really enjoy talking. So Robin has been performing the demo for under 20 minutes, and he's already completed at least half of the tasks on this list. There's only 10 minutes left in this webinar too. And so you can guess he's probably going to remediate and complete all of those steps in under 30 minutes. So going from a month or a quarter or holy cow, a year down to 30 minutes is pretty epic a change in my opinion. So I'll stop talking and I'll actually let Robin prove my words correct by going through and remediating these issues.
No pressure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, pulling back up my screen share here. Excellent. Hopefully you all can see the Chef supermarket at this point. All right.
I can.
Great. So now at this point, the slide that we have pushed up now also shows that, we're good to go on 2 of those security concerns. But now we'd like to go through and remediate those issues that we've identified to become compliant on this app server. Now, there's a number of ways you could accomplish this, right? However you do your remediation, there are reasons for that. But if you do start using Chef products to help with remediation, like Chef Infra, like a lot of you currently use, you can use cookbooks to go ahead and step through and harden your servers as well. So many ways to accomplish this, but I'm going to demonstrate a Chef way to do this using a community cookbook called OS-hardening. So to be very clear, we're going to use a Chef Infra package to go through and remediate these issues. And this cookbook, this Chef Infra package, is available on the supermarket called OS-hardening. This would be the ability to go through and remediate a lot of these security concerns. And ideally, before you jump in and just use something like this from the supermarket, make sure, of course, that you test it thoroughly and make sure that it's performing the actions that you need it to. I'm going to create my own version of this package within my application server. So heading back into my CentOS 7 workstation, this is where I've been running the report package we just created with Habitat. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that supervisor run right now and stop it from running the report package we created. And at this point, I'm going to begin working with a package I've created called remediation. This contains a cookbooks directory that has my cookbook I've generated called security-baseline. For those of you that are interested or familiar with Chef Infra, essentially I've gone through and run the chef generate cookbook command inside of cookbooks or remediation/cookbooks, and I've created a cookbook called security-baseline. It's a very simple, straightforward Chef Infra coding here. If you're not familiar with this, simply understand this is how I create a Chef Infra package. And from here, looking inside of this cookbook that was generated for me from running that command, I have a metadata file that goes through and places 2 dependencies on those hardening cookbooks from the Chef supermarket. I've gone ahead and added an additional dependency on the Windows hardening cookbook, so I can have one security baseline wrapper cookbook that could deploy to multiple different platforms. Looking inside of my default recipe for this cookbook, I've essentially defined the logic that should determine when one of those cookbooks should be used. If the operating system resolves to Linux, call the OS hardening cookbook. If it resolves to Windows, call the Windows hardening cookbook. So very simple cookbook here that just wraps these supermarket dependencies and allows me to deploy those default recipes to do some standard hardening on my server. The last thing that my Chef Infra package needs is a policy file. The policy file goes through and defines what cookbooks should be run under what circumstances. And in this case, I'm stating that anywhere where my base policy is loaded, I should be executing that security baseline cookbook I just created. Great. So that's it for my Chef Infra package. And at this point, I would like to go ahead and package it up with Habitat and deploy it to remediate these compliance concerns. So I have this cookbook that's been created for me. Ideally, I would have been testing it to see that it works properly. And now at this point, I'm ready to package it up with Habitat. I'm going to CD into that remediation directory here on the same level as cookbooks and policy files. And now I'm going to begin turning it into a Habitat package, which you didn't get to see me do before. Within this directory, I'll run hab plan init. And this is going to go ahead and scaffold out a directory called Habitat inside of my remediation directory. So you can see, very easy to create these files. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and set up a plan file, like we mentioned before. Opening up the plan.sh file that was auto-generated for me, it has a ton of options that can be available for you for setting up Chef Habitat packages. I'm going to go ahead and delete these and replace it with a very simple plan.sh configuration. And again, we're going to use scaffolding to set up our Chef Infra package very easily. Notice instead of calling the Chef InSpec scaffolding, I'm using Chef Infra here. I have a couple other configurables that are useful for Chef Infra packages, like I'm going to expose the Chef client ID there so I can easily query it. And I'm going to state the process, the user that should run the Chef client process there, root. Lastly here, I just need to set up some configurables for Chef client in order to Chef Infra client in order to run my package. This is again done in that default.toml file, which is where we can place our configurables for the package. Making sure I have this correct. Excellent. And now inside of this default.toml, I'm going to go ahead and place some very simple configurables for Chef client, such as how often should the Chef client run? Right now, every 5 minutes, plus an offset of 30 seconds. And I'm going to set some other configurables like the logging level and how to handle SSL. Lastly, if I want to report back to my Chef Automate server, I can supply those configurables again. I'm going to grab the Chef server URL here and paste it into my default.toml. Excellent. And lastly, I'm going to grab my automate token so that I can report back. And that's it. I have Habitat. I have turned this into a Habitat package. Scaffolding makes this very easy to do. And from here, I'm ready to go ahead and build my Habitat package. Of course, build is not found inside of the local environment. I again need to enter that clean room environment where I build packages with hab studio enter within the remediation directory. Again, we are setting up this studio in a totally new directory, a totally new package. So again, we have to recreate a studio environment to get started there. And now I'm ready to go ahead and build the remediation package. You can see it's grabbing the Chef tooling that it needs. And there it goes, downloading the Chef client.
So this is pulling in any dependencies that Chef Infra has for the package?
Exactly, and you'll notice it packaging up those cookbooks as well, those dependencies that we mentioned before.
Oh, nice. So it reached out to supermarket as well.
You'll see its run list defined from that policy file. And essentially everything is now contained within my Habitat artifact, which could then be exported to other formats like Docker, for example, in general. But if I look at the results directory now, I can see that, again, we have that new Habitat artifact, and you'll see it prefixed by my origin, learn-chef, and the name, that base policy file we described before. So pretty nice. Once you get the Habitat directories created, very easy to build these packages and update the cookbooks, the dependencies, etc. And now I can use this package outside of the studio. So essentially now I'm ready to load this remediation package with the supervisor and see if it worked. I can check the status of the supervisor. And of course I need to spell HAB correctly. And you can see it's unable to contact the supervisor, which means that it's currently not running. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run the supervisor with sudo hab sup run, and I'm going to background this process so that it, and once again with the hab sup run. And now I'm going to be waiting here in order to load any packages I would like to run. Firstly, you see that the compliance package from before is still loaded. Pressing enter to get back my prompt, I should now be able to load with sudo hab svc load my learn-chef package called base. Package not found. So the last thing that needs to happen, right, is that the supervisor needs to have that package available. So before I can load it, the last thing that needs to happen is I need to say sudo hab package install from the results directory that learn chef habitat artifact from before. Now that it's been installed, I can load it with the supervisor. The service was successfully loaded, and there you can see immediately it's starting the Chef client and stepping through the security baseline policy that I've defined, making changes to this system and hardening it according to the context of that hardening cookbook. And there we go. The Chef client run completed. Look at that. My auditing package, the report package, is also still loaded. So immediately after the Chef client run completed, notice my report package ran and reports back that I am now compliant. 3 successful controls, 0 failures. And just to verify this and make sure that it's true, heading back into the Chef Automate dashboard under Reports, I can refresh that reporting section here and notice that my node that is auto-reporting back on its state is now compliant with no control failures. And there we see our 3 controls passing. Ta-da! I hope that provides a good little overview for you on how you can create these compliance packages that can be created up front instead of as an afterthought. We can constantly be auditing our application nodes and doing essentially what could be called continuous compliance to report back on the state of our application servers and immediately get feedback on whether our changes were valid. That compliance package can be deployed anywhere where our app servers are running, and it's just nice to immediately be able to see the state of those nodes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robin, for demoing that for us.
You're welcome.
So yeah, we have gone through and created a reporting package, remediated our systems, and then automated that process of continuously scanning for compliance and continuously remediating whatever does fall out of compliance. I promised I would end with some real world results. And since we're 6 minutes over already, I'll speed talk through this. I just want to say we have a major healthcare services provider who's a customer of ours. I can't say their name legally, but I can say they have initials, and they are a large number of pharmacies across the US. But to give you sort of an example of a real world to give you a real world example of how this is used, they cut their audit time in more than half. They cut it by 95%. So they used to have an audit time of 17 days, probably like 100 engineers working on all of this work. They were able to cut that down to 1 day in order to verify the state of compliance for their healthcare services provider. And I'm not sure where the audience is all from today, but the healthcare industry has a lot of regulations, if you are not aware. And so this really does help mitigate the issue of security kind of bogging down the development process. So the last thing I want to do is end with some resources that you can go to after this webinar ends. Disregard the formatting issues on the slide. That's just a result of porting this from Google Docs into PowerPoint. But if you would like to learn more how to use Chef and all of the awesome tools that we just talked about, you can go to learn.chef.io. You'll see a bunch of tutorials, demos, workshops, online white papers, all that kind of stuff. If you'd like to meet with other chefs and talk about the projects that you're working on, you can head to events.chef.io, where we will be posting the different events that Robin, myself, the other developer advocates, and other engineers within Chef will be attending. And then the third thing, if you want to build open source materials, if you want to look at the tools and get your hands dirty with all of Chef, you can go to github.com/chef and participate in our online community there. And one last thing, we have Robin, myself, and our coworkers Kimball and Mandy both put together a list of all of our favorite Learn Chef Rally tutorial modules. And Aaron, who introduced us and who will come back on to sign off, has put together an awesome little holiday event for Learn Chef Rally. So look in your emails for that email that will guide you through our holiday extravaganza at learn.chef.io. And lastly, I want to say on behalf of Robin and myself, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. And sorry we went just a little bit over. Aaron, I will hand it back to you now.
All right. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. We do have some questions here. If you have a question, feel free to pop it in. Obviously, we're a little bit over time, but just want to spend some time walking through some of the questions here. So the first one we got is, do I need to already be using Chef Infra or InSpec to use these patterns?
Oh, that's a great question. So a lot of people have that question just because they've come from the historical standpoint as a customer of Chef, where they've been working with Chef Infra Server or even Chef InSpec. No, you don't need to have a history with any of these tools to use this pattern. Just need to talk to one of us and get that conversation going. So good question.
All right. Another one here. Can I use this with my existing Chef Infra cookbooks and InSpec profiles?
Ooh, okay. So the opposite question, basically. Yes, absolutely. You can use this with your existing profiles and cookbooks. As Robin showed or demonstrated in his demo, we used a cookbook from the supermarket, so a pre-existing cookbook. We also pulled down a pre-existing profile. All of this stuff already exists for you to be able to use out there. So you can definitely use these patterns with your pre-existing Chef InSpec and Chef Infra use cases. Looks like we have another, let's see, display. Oh, in Chef Automate, we have 29 servers with a failed control. However, we can't display the list of server names from the UI. Okay. Jay, this one might be something that we can take offline, because it sounds like you're asking about your own Chef Automate instance. And so I would need to get a little bit more information there. Let's see. Yeah, so let me hang on. Let's see how I would get the answer to you outside of this. Yeah, we will follow up. I think we have registration emails and everything. So Jay, I'll reach out to you and follow up on that.
All right. Well, I think we will close it out there. Thanks everybody for attending. As a reminder, a copy of today's presentation is located in the resource list widget at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to download that at any time. You can jump back in once the webinar is on demand and grab that as well. The on-demand version should be available by tomorrow, and you'll receive an email as soon as that's ready, and you can access it using the same link that you're using right now. Lastly, like Jody mentioned, we do have this fun campaign running during the month of December. It's called Our Favorite Things with Learn Chef Rally. Jody and Robin and others have chosen some of their favorite modules in Learn Chef Rally for you to complete. And we have brand new swag to earn. The swag is pretty sweet, so I definitely encourage you to check it out and finish some new modules so you can accelerate your learning. And that is chef.io/holidays to learn more about that. So with that, we will wrap it up. Thanks again, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.